our liturgy tonight is a liturgy of contrast. Light and darkness. Power and humility. Strength and weakness. And the whole liturgy is trying to help us to understand how we could begin to speak about God becoming a little baby. When we think God, we think the most powerful being that there is, the one who was, who is, and who will be, when all time has passed. And yet, when we think Christmas, we think that this God has become a little child, has become flesh of our flesh, bone of our bone. And any of you who have held a little child knows, vulnerable, weak, dependent. All the things that are the complete opposite of who we would think God to be. When we use words for God, omnipresent, omnipotent, all kinds of omnis, to describe this God who is beyond anything that our mind could ever conceive. And when we come to Christmas night, we then take a different description of God, and we understand and see God as a child in a mother's arm, weak, vulnerable, and open to human beings. In the beginning, we started in the darkness, and the light turned on to see the child. And in the beginning there was darkness. And then the true light came into the world. A light to illumine the darkness. A light to illumine the darkness. Our first reading says, a people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. On them the light has shone. And he will be called Wonder Counselor, Prince of Peace, Mighty God. For great will be his dominion, in a peace that will have no end. Pat Bishop, a very famous artist in Trinidad, known for her music and her ability to bring steel band people to do classicals and all kinds of music. She's also an artist, and one year she did a number of small miniature paintings. And one of the paintings, the title of it was, "A people who have seen a great light have continued to walk in darkness." And she had a picture for this painting. A people who have seen a great light have chosen to continue walking in darkness. We have seen the great light. What is the choice that makes for us? Or what choice do we make when we see this great light? When we see the great light of Christ coming into the world on this Christmas night, does that set our hearts and our life in motion to choose the light or to continue walking in darkness? Our gospel reading speaks about these opposites in the most dramatic way that one could ever imagine. It starts off with Caesar Augustus making a decree for the census of all the world. Caesar is the Lord, and all the world understood Caesar as the Lord. Curious. And at the end of the text, we see a baby being born who is the Lord. So who is the Lord? Is it Caesar living in his fine palace with all of his armies and divisions? Or is it Jesus Christ, a child born in a manger with humble parents, not even a proper sanitized bed to put him in? Where is the real power? Where is the real power? That's the question that the gospel is asking. Where is the real power? It is either in this script, or it is somewhere up the road. Maybe Bishop's house. Maybe Lara Court, I don't know. Maybe government, I don't know where it is. Where is the real power? And brothers and sisters, until we are willing to answer that question about where the real power is, we will not understand the Christian message. As long as we believe that the real power lives in houses where people have fine divisions and great titles, as long as we believe that that's where the real power is, we will not have given our heart over to the mystery of the Christian tradition. The real power in this text is not Caesar Augustus, who was master of the whole known world. It was not Quirinius. It was not any of the officials. The real power was a little child, born of a maiden, in a stable, with the donkey, the sheep, the cow, and the animals, put to rest in the trough where their food would usually be. That's where the real power was, and that's the question that Luke is asking. Where is the real power? And somehow, 2,000 years after, we haven't got where the real power is. And we still think that the real power is in those who have the divisions and in the titles. We don't see that the real power is in vulnerability and powerlessness. And in that, we've been made an invitation from God to stand as God stood, not with the power of might, but with the power of humility. Not with the power of armies, but with the power of lowliness. Not with the power of majesty, but with the power of service. If we understand the Christmas message, and we understand that the real power is in this child, then we have to ask ourselves, why is it we're afraid as a church to suffer ridicule? Why is it we're afraid to stand up for what is right and what is true? Why is it we're afraid to do the right thing among our friends in the office? Why is it we're afraid to raise our voice and say what we really believe and live what we really believe in public? Y'all think it's a rhetorical question? Yeah? Okay, y'all think it's a rhetorical question? Do we do it? Come on, talk to me now. I hear you. Do we live what we say we believe? Do we? Or are we afraid of what people will say? Are we? Are we afraid to stand up for what is true? Come on, I ain't answering. Raise your hand and let me know now. Are we afraid, yes or no? And if we are afraid, it's because we don't understand where the real power is. If we're afraid, it is because we believe that the real power is with those who have might. And it is not. The real power is with those who hold to the truth, because He is the way, the truth, and the life. And if we hold to Christ, we are holding to the real power. And yes, it might be uncomfortable. And yes, it might make us vulnerable. And yes, we will suffer for it. And yes, the road will be difficult. But where is the real power? That's the question that Christmas is asking. And you have to answer that question. Not by your voice, not by your words, but by your life. Those who are martyrs witness to the truth that Christ is the real power, and they were willing to be vulnerable unto death. Truth is never convenient. It's never convenient. But it is always the way to Christ. Always the way to Christ. We're celebrating Christmas night. And on this night, God becomes human being so that we can be divinized. We can become like God. We can take on the relationship of God. We can, again, as Adam and Eve in the cool of the garden, have that incredible open intimacy with God. We can come back to that intimacy with God. And that doesn't mean that we will be spared from suffering and pain. What it does mean is that we will have a relationship with God, second to none. At the very Christmas story, we have the slaughter of the innocent. Because Herod thought he was a real power, and he wanted to know who was his pretender, and so he went to kill him, killing innocent children. Right in the Christmas story. Right there. And could God not have raised legions and armies to defend it? Could he not have? But that's not the way of God. That's not the way of God. Because God has given us free will. And He's asked us to make choices with our free will. Will we choose to live for God or not? In Luke's Gospel, as we hear Caesar Augustus, the one that the whole world proclaims as the Lord, and as we hear Jesus Christ, a child in a manger, we've been asked a question here. How are we going to live? And what is this Christ child going to mean to us? Brothers and sisters, we have been invited every Christmas. We're invited to contemplate again the mystery of all mysteries, that God becomes a human being. And second to that mystery of God becoming a human being is the mystery that we will celebrate here in a little while, where God becomes bread and wine to nourish us to salvation. Yes, God becomes a human being and a child, and in every Eucharist God becomes flesh. And every time we receive the body and blood of Christ, we partake of Him, and He becomes flesh of our flesh and bone of our bone. And we are entering into the mystery, and we are invited to live in this intimacy that we have been created for. Every time we come to this altar, we come to an invitation to intimacy with God. Where is the real power? And so often when we come to Mass, the real power is really in the to-do list for next week that we're constructing in our mind while the priest is preaching his homily. Now so? Come on. Come on. And you're remembering all the things during last week that we were supposed to do and didn't get to do, and start to make notes now because we have to write them down somewhere when we leave Mass to remember to do them next week. And the shopping list that we're supposed to do. And we don't go along every aisle in the grocery while the priest is carrying on. What are you carrying on with? That's all. Where's the real power? Where is it? You hear me? Tell me a lie now. Oh, come on, man. Tell me a lie. Huh? And yet, in our midst, He is present in the word that is read. Christ is present, and we can encounter Christ in the word. He's present in the Eucharist, and we can encounter Him in the Eucharist. And He's present in the poor, and we can encounter Him in the poor. And that's the message of our synod. Word, Eucharist, and service are three ways of encountering Jesus Christ. Three ways. Now, as Catholics, we have a rich tradition, but we will only understand this tradition if we understand where the real power is. It is in the vulnerability of the poor. It is in the Word, and it is in the Eucharist. And if we are true to Word, Eucharist, and the poor, our lives will make choices to follow Christ no matter where He leads, and no matter how inconvenient it will be. Today we celebrate with great joy that God became a human being. Let us also celebrate with great joy today that we make choices to become like God. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.